Hello guys, welcome to Swift TV. But the water begins chaining them as Lapis decides she's done being a taker and is going to be a giver before pulling the fusion to the bottom of the ocean to suffer in the cold and dark forever. Greg arrives in his van, then Steven tells his father what happened, which causes him to have a panic attack. Connie calls him, but he doesn't want to worry her, so he decides to ghost her. She comes to his home, but Steven dodges her like child support. She sees him running away and follows after him. He breaks up with her over a text, but she tells him to say it to her face. He stands up and tries, but he can't bring himself to say it. He tells her that he didn't want her to worry, then explains to Connie everything that happened. She tells him that she wants to be a part of his universe, then Greg picks them up and drives home. Steven goes to Pearl and asks for her to train Connie. She rejects him, but Connie tells Pearl that all she wants to do is fight by Steven's side and protect him, then she accepts. At first, Pearl begins giving her actual lessons and points to drastically improve her sword skills, but after a while, she begins to gaslight Connie into becoming a meat shield to serve and go to heaven for Steven. He talks with the other gems about her training, and Garnet explains that when Pearl served Rose, she would sacrifice her physical form countless times to protect her. Steven rushes in to stop the indoctrination when he meets a hologram Pearl, but he's saved by Connie. She tells him that her life is nothing compared to his, so she will protect him, but he says that he also wants to protect her. They begin fighting together and defeat all the Hollow Pearls until the real Pearl shows up and easily defeats both of them. She tells Connie that in a real battle Steven should never be in danger because he's too important, but he tells Pearl that he wants to fight alongside Connie. Pearl begins projecting her relationship with Rose onto Steven, and Connie then decides to take a break. They go over and comforts Pearl, then she accepts that them fighting together is stronger than just Connie fighting alone. The next day, Garnet realizes that Peridot might still be trying to activate the drills at the kindergarten to create an army of gems. The crystal gem heads there and split up to explore. Steven finds Peridot coming from a basement. She asks him if he's there alone. Steven's mind is telling him no, but his body is saying yes. The crystal gems chases after her, then she begins to fly, but Garnet grabs Steven to check out what she was doing. They see many cylinders sticking out of the wall and find shattered gems that were forcefully fused together. To Garnet's disgust, a giant forced fusion forms and attacks her. She reveals that all these fusions were crystal gems that got smoked in the war, and this is how Homeworld punished them, then she poofs it. The crystal gems returns and reveal the lost Peridot, so they decide to search the ocean for Lapis and Jasper the Destroyer, but they begin getting tired and Garnet takes them home, then goes to continue searching. Steven falls asleep, but he finds Lapis at the door. She tells him to leave because she's slowly losing control and needs to concentrate. He wakes up, then tells Pearl what happened. She says Steven is using his dreams to communicate with Lapis mentally, so he decides to sleep and find her location. Steven finds Lapis holding down her fusion with the weight of the ocean. He asks for her location, but Jasper takes control, then crawls to Steven when hit a lick. Lapis comes back and return her to the trenches. She tells Steven to leave and transforms into Malachite to return him to his body. Garnet comes back and Steven tells her what happened, but she tells him not to worry, then sleeps like a boss. Steven and Amethyst sits and watches TV when Lapis suddenly comes on the screen and begins sending a message for help on every signal. Garnet realized she fixed the tower Sugilite destroyed. Amethyst wants to fuse again, but Garnet refuses because the last time they were feeling themselves too much. She asks Pearl to fuse, and Garnet proves that she's the dumb in every relationship when they form Sardonic. They fuse their weapons to form a hammer and begin precisely hitting the weak points of the tower to make it collapse. They celebrate their accomplishment, then head back to continue their show. The signal comes back online as Pearl comes home and they go back to play Jenga again. Steven notices that Amethyst feels jealous that she has nothing to do, so they decide to stake out the area to capture Peridot. He sees someone fixing the tower and realizes that Pearl was the one who repaired the tower. They go back home and find the signal back online. The gems head back, but before they can form Sardonic, they confront Pearl about what she did. Garnet is disgusted that Pearl lied to her so she can hit. Pearl says she just wanted to win battles with her, but Garnet wants to end this moment for life, so they form Sugilite and demolish the building, then heads home with Garnet now ignoring Pearl's existence. They warp to Peridot's location. Pearl rushes in only to get used as a weapon. The gems do a team ultimate to take her down, but Pearl gets in the way again, which leads to her escaping. They return home where Pearl apologizes and goes back to track Peridot's location. The gems warp to her coordinates, then Pearl runs inside the spaceship. Peridot comes on a screen and asks if they're ready to play a game before activating lasers to rain down on them, but Steven always keeps his umbrella close. They escape to the next room and run from more traps until Steven and Amethyst get separated from Garnet and Pearl. She apologizes to Garnet and tells her that she's going to catch Peridot to make it up to her. Garnet says that won't fix their relationship. She tells Garnet that pearls are useless on their own and only when they're together does she feel powerful, but Garnet reveals that she just pretends to be strong because the team needs her to be and tell her she's strong in her own way. They form sardonic and burst out of the trap, then go to battle Peridot. She uses her hands to fly away, but Steven jumps on her, then begins to pull her down. Peridot detaches her legs and escapes again. They go home and Steven gets ready to go to bed when Peridot comes in and Solid snakes him to the warp portal. She tells him to fix the space portal like he did Lapis's gem, and Special Steven actually tries to repair it. But luckily he can't heal machines. The crystal gem shows up and use their team ultimate and back her into a corner. Peridot tries to tell them something but Garnet smokes her. Steven wonders what she was trying to say and wishes to see her when Rose's room opens and takes him to where the bubble gems are kept. He activates Peridot and asks what she knows. She tells Steven that her mission was to check on the cluster inside the planet, then runs away into the living room where the crystal gems confront her. Peridot locks herself in the bathroom and tries to escape to no avail. They scold Steven for freeing her, but he tells them about the cluster. Garnet doesn't know what that is, so they decide to leave her on smoke. Steven gives Peridot her missing leg, then she lets him inside. He begins telling her about Earth items and says they will help her for information, but she refuses to tell them, so they decide to go out and look for knowledge themselves while leaving Steven to watch their captive. A storm begins to form and Peridot comes out of the bathroom thinking it's the cluster. Steven shows her that rain is harmless, then she decides to tell him about the cluster, but she says they need to head to the kindergarten to see it. They enter the not-so-secret basement and activates the computer, then Peridot tells Steven that the cluster is made up of millions of gem shards and when it takes form the Earth will be destroyed. They walk back home when many mutated gems starts to attack them, but the crystal gems arrives and saves the day, then scolds Steven for freeing Peridot again, but she steps forward and tells them about the cluster. They head to a farm and decide to build a drill so they can dig to the cluster. The gems begin to work together and build their machine while Peridot slowly starts to get along with the gems and see the beauty of the Earth. They finish the gem but need to go to the moon base to find the exact coordinates for the cluster, so they ride the teleporting lion to the fortress. Steven sees a mural and asks about them. Peridot tells him the diamonds are flawless goddesses that rule homeworld and all gems live to serve them. They head upstairs and finds a control panel where Steven sits in the diamond seat and activates the machine. Peridot uses the computer and locates the cluster, then begins searching the files and finds what homeworld planned for the Earth. She praises the ingenuity to the disgust of the other gems. They tell her that all organism would have been packed up, but she sees it as a small sacrifice, causing Garnet to smash the computer before leaving, but Peridot took something from the base as they head home. Steven sees Peridot with the device, then tricks her and takes it before locking her in a van. He shows the crystal gems and they realize that it is a communication device that connects to the diamonds. Peridot breaks out the van and takes the device, then runs away. They chase her in Amethyst and scores a takedown, and the gems begins jumping the robot, but Peridot escapes, then activates the transponder. Yellow Diamond asks about her mission. She tells the diamond that the ship was destroyed by a crash landing and says that she wants to deactivate the cluster because she thinks the Earth's resources can further their empire. Yellow tells Peridot that she doesn't care about resources, she just wants to see the Earth gone, but Peridot refuses to do it, then hangs up. The gems go over and celebrate as Lapis sits in a ball as she realizes that she's now a race traitor like them. Steven wakes up in the body of his melon child. He walks through the village, then attends a ceremony led by Elder Melon where everyone calls not it but Steven, so he gets chosen to be a great sacrifice to the now freed Malachite. Steven returns to his body and tells the gems what he saw. They decide to go have a look but leaves him behind, so he settles to take over another innocent melon's mind to see all the gems fuse. They tell Malachite that she is outnumbered, but she's got the home field advantage. The gems try their best to fight her, but Malachite is just too powerful. Steven goes to convince his offsprings to leave their homes and families behind to help in the fight against Malachite. They begin using all they have to overwhelm them and give the gems a chance to defeat her with an up air followed by their final smash. The gems go over and thank the melons for their help, but the cluster begins to form, so they tell Steven to head to his real body and stop it. Steven returns and tell Peridot what happened, then they enter the drill and begin heading toward the cluster. They travel down the Earth until they reach the formation. Peridot begins to drill it, but it somehow causes pain to Steven. He tells her to continue as he feels unimaginable pain before passing out. He wakes up in the mind of the cluster. They want to take form and feel whole again, but Steven convinces them that they don't have to fuse to be whole, but instead they can chill with each other. They begin being forced to form as Steven tries to bubble them, but they're too many. He returns to his body and sees that the shards started bubbling themselves, then he uses his godlike powers to flawlessly bubble all of them at once. They go up and see the gems holding Lapis, then tells them what happened. In the night, Steven goes to check on her and sees Lapis leaving. He says goodbye, then she flies away. In the morning, Peridot decides to stay on the farm as the rest of the gems go home. Steven looks for lurking Lion but only finds lonely Lapis sitting on a silo. He goes up and wonders why she's still there. She tells Steven that she has no home to go back to, so they decide to head out and search for a place for her to live. They travel to many locations until Lapis sees the space warp. She tells Steven that this is where she was when she got poofed and placed into a mirror by Homeworld, but when the crystal gems won the war they abandoned her to suffer alone until Pearl found her. They decide to go back home as Steven tells her that she is no longer a prisoner, so she is free to explore the world as much as she likes. Lapis decides that she wants to stay on the barn, but she's confused as why Peridot is there. They begin fighting over the barn, so Steven decides to divide it in half, but Lapis doesn't want Peridot as a roommate because she kept her prisoner. She tells Lapis that she has changed, but Lapis doesn't care and flies away. Peridot says she needs to make Lapis believe her. Steven comes up with an idea to surprise her with a pool built by Peridot, but she points out that she was imprisoned under the sea while trying to hold back Jasper, so she's taking a break from water. Peridot decides to give her a recorder as a present, but the traumatized hateful emo bitch breaks it and tells Peridot to leave the barn. Steven scolds her for being mean as Peridot begins running back because a gem ship started chasing her. They play hide and seek, but the ship is a good seeker. Never lacking, Lapis steps up and reminds them why she's the strongest as the crystal gems arrive. Peridot walks away, but Lapis begins talking to her when a Ruby suddenly comes out of the ship. Garnet diffuses and sends Ruby to invade their ranks. They wonder what's inside the barn, so she goes to get Steven and tells them it's filled with humans. The Ruby asks for Jasper, so Steven tells her that she is on Neptune. They put no stat points in intelligence, so the Rubies believed him and enter their ship to fly towards Neptune. Steven goes to his dad, where Greg reveals that one of his songs took off, so now he caught the bag and is stacking paper. He decides to bring Steven on a vacation, but Steven decides to bring Pearl along. They go to a hotel and start flexing on the staff and let them carry the group to the bar, where they begin feeling themselves. Greg tries to dance with Pearl, but she says no and leaves to the room. Pearl says that she was fine when Rose dated other people, but when Greg came into the picture for the first time she chose someone over her, and to make it worse she gave up her life to bring Steven into the world. She flexes her balance and wonders why she can't move on from grieving her passing. She walks back in to see that everyone is now awake when Greg, feeling bad for cucking Pearl, leaves the room. He apologizes for taking her girl, but they recalled that Rose always did what she wanted. They begin dancing and reminisce about their past with her. Then they get ready to leave and goes home with their relationship now being closer. Steven has daddy's money and go to Peridot and gives her a tablet. She attaches it to her arm, then Amethyst arrives and takes them to an amusement park where Steven and Amethyst abuses their shapeshifting abilities so they can win prizes. Peridot gets jealous of their powers, so they try to teach her how to do it, but she reveals that because Homeworld is lacking resources, newer gems like her don't have powers. Amethyst tells her she's fine the way she is, but Peridot ignores her lies. She takes Peridot's tablets and tries to toss it, but she awakens an ability and brings it back to her. Realizing she now has powers, she uses it to cheat and gets a giant teddy before going home. The next day, Steven invites Lapis to go on a boat trip with Greg to get rid of her fear of water. They explore the open sea, then Greg tries to teach them how to fish when a giant creature pulls on the line that causes the rod to break. Something suddenly hits the boat, which sends the motor to heaven and traps them on the sea with land-loving Lapis. She tells Steven that she misses being fused because she was malachite for months when Jasper the Harasser comes on board. Steven tries to protect her, but Jasper's hand is rated E for everyone. She tells Lapis to fuse with her and become a god, but Lapis refuses because their relationship was unhealthy. She blames Steven for taking Lapis away, then she reminds everyone why she's the strongest gem. They fly home on Lapis as the boat starts to sail with the fishes. The gems decide to go smoke top up Jasper while Steven goes to train with Connie. A giant monster suddenly comes on the beach and heads for Steven, but Amethyst uses her whip to strangle the creature until it flatlines. Jasper the Conqueror suddenly comes out the sea riding another monster. Amethyst decides to 1v1 her, but she stands no chance against the gem killer as she becomes a punching bag. Jasper poofs Amethyst and tries to shatter her, but Steven and Connie form Stevanie, then begin styling on her with Lion. They joust against each other with Jasper losing. Amethyst reforms to see Stevanie putting Jasper on her knees and forces her to retreat into the ocean, then she congratulates them for winning but begins to feel useless. The gems come back and Steven tells them about what happened, then Pearl makes him continue training, but he goes to Amethyst and invites her to train with him. Pearl starts by training their speed, but Steven is faster than Amethyst. She teaches them how to dodge, but Steven has the moves like Jagger. Pearl decides their last test will be a fight against her clones. Amethyst defeats one while Steven uses his giant shield to Captain America the rest and claims the day's victory. Steven sees that Amethyst is feeling down, so he invites her to play games and makes her win. She realized what Steven did and says that Steven is now stronger than her, but he disagrees, so they decide to have a battle to see who is worse. Amethyst sonics around Steven and ties him up, but he uses his bubble to break free. She throws him into a pillar and he activates a new ability, then comes out of his bubble to give her equal rights before saving her life. Both of them are now exhausted and try to finish the fight with the last blow, but they miss the mark. Amethyst says she will never match Jasper, but Steven points out that he will never match Rose. They realize that both of them are struggling and squashes the beef as Pearl comes in and scolds them for destroying the arena. Later on, the gems sit and play games when Leono starts assaulting Steven's clothes. He decides to put it in Lion's mane but accidentally frees a gem that's inside. The gem begins to glow and bismuth takes form. Steven brings her out and Pearl jump into her arms and said they believed she was shattered in the war. Garnet explains that bismuth was one of the original crystal gems from 50-100 years ago. She asks where Rose is and Steven tells her what happened, then she asks where the rest of the crystal gems are. They bring her to the old battlefield and reveal that they are the only ones who are left. Bismuth gets angry and decides that from now on they will fight back against Homeworld. They head to a volcano. She leads them to her old base, then begins building weapons and gives out free upgrades to everyone. They begin showing Bismuth how the world has changed, then call it a day. In the night, Bismuth asks Steven about his weapons. He shows her his shield and Rose's sword, then she reveals to Steven that she built the sword after she was inspired by the flawless goddess to be whatever she wanted to be. Steven tells her that he doesn't think he can ever live up to her, but Bismuth tells him that he should be like himself and decides to give him a weapon. She brings him to the forge and reveals a weapon that would have won the war. She shows him that it's made to not poof gems, but to shatter them completely, and gives it to Steven. He refuses to use the weapon because he doesn't want to stoop to Homeworld's level and tells her no one's going to equip it. Bismuth says that Rose said the same before she poofed and trapped her inside Lion. She begins to attack Steven while saying that if Rose used this weapon, not only would they have won the war, but they could have conquered Homeworld too. He pushes her away and begin floating, but she throws a golem at him, but Steven has the reverse Uno card to send it back. He tells Bismuth to stop and she asks him to shatter her. Steven refuses, so she attacks and forces him to use the sword. She says that Rose didn't care enough to even tell the crystal gems what happened to her, but Steven says he will tell them and Bismuth smiles as she poofs away. Steven returns with a bubbled Bismuth and tells them what occurred. Days later, Steven and Amethyst goes to visit the barn. They see Lapis and Peridot watching television. They show them all the changes they've made and play music for them, but Amethyst isn't amused because she wants to go and train to beat Jasper. Peridot tells her that Jasper was also born on Earth, so they go to visit Jasper's kindergarten. They walk around until they come up on a huge hole, but it's perfect in every way, making Amethyst feel inferior. They find many holes containing corrupted gems. When Pokemon Master Jasper shows herself, Amethyst tries to assassin Creed her, but Jasper knows she is there and says that they are abominations because Amethyst is misshapen and Rose is now Steven. Amethyst wants the one-on-one and attacks Jasper, but she eats all her attacks and begins to punish her. Steven throws his shield to separate the fight and tells Amethyst that he wants to help her, then they fuse to form Smoky Quartz. They summon their yo-yo and proves that fusions are Jasper's kryptonite. In an act of desperation, Jasper chooses to fuse with a corrupted gem, but she's still no match for them. She unfuses and accepts her defeat as she begins to get corrupted. Special Steven wants to help the enemy who tried to unalive him, but Jasper refuses and chose to be fully corrupted because of what Rose did to Pink Diamond. Peridot comes in clutch and backstabs her, then Amethyst goes over and bubbles Jasper. Like the video if you like the video, subscribe for more. Thanks for watching and remember to stay swifty.